John Denver was an American folk singer, songwriter, and actor, a man whose voice drifted through homes like a warm breeze, and whose songs felt stitched into the soul of an entire generation. He collected awards, dominated charts, starred in hits, and lived in the glow of a career most artists only dream of. But the final stretch of his life looked nothing like the bright, open-sky years that made him a legend. At 53, his story ended far too soon, and the path leading there was heavier, lonelier, and far more heartbreaking than anyone expected. The man who once felt untouchable was suddenly facing battles most people never saw. So how did John Denver die? And what was really happening in those last quiet days when the world wasn't watching? Settle in, because we're pulling back the curtain on a final chapter that's as haunting as it is unforgettable. John Denver's restless childhood, the hidden story behind the legend. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. came into the world on December 31, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, long before anyone imagined his voice would one day drift across generations. His parents, Irma Louise and Captain Henry John Dutch Deutschendorf Sr., were already living a life built around the hum of military orders and the constant rhythm of the airfield. Dutch wasn't just any pilot. In 1961, he broke airspeed records in a Convair B-58 Hustler, the kind of achievement the military never lets you forget. But inside the home, that same larger-than-life intensity took on a different weight. In his autobiography, Take Me Home, John revealed that his father carried a sternness that made affection feel like something locked behind a steel door. Growing up with a man who commanded the sky for a living meant the family never stayed anywhere long enough for roots to take hold. Every transfer came with another school, another neighborhood, and another group of kids who already had their circles. John spent most of those early years hovering on the edges, trying to blend in but always feeling like he was a few steps out of sync. He often described those years as a time when he never felt fully settled, was never sure where he belonged, and was deeply aware of how different he was from the children around him. The introverted boy kept those feelings close, letting them sit heavy inside him while the world around him shifted again and again. Things softened a little when the Air Force stationed his father at Davis-Monthan in Tucson. The family bought a house, a rare anchor, and for 8 years, from ages 6 to 14, Tucson became the first place John could exhale. He attended Mansfield Junior High and spent 2 years singing with the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus, finding a sliver of comfort in music and routine. For once, the ground beneath him felt steady. But military life never asks permission before uprooting a family. Just as John was settling into the balance of Tucson, his father received new orders sending them to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And before he could adjust there, they were moving again, this time to Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Worth was different, and not in a way that eased anything inside him. John struggled with the energy of the place, the pace of the school, and the expectations pressed onto him. He felt trapped in a life that kept turning without him, and by his junior year of high school, he reached a breaking point. One day, he took his father's car, pointed it toward California, and went after the faint promise of a music career and the comfort of family friends who understood him in ways his world back home couldn't. The rebellion didn't last long. In one of those moments that feels too dramatic to be real, Dutch borrowed a friend's jet and flew straight to California to bring his son back. John returned to Texas, not out of desire, but because he didn't have much of a choice. He finished high school, but the longing for something bigger, something freer, never left him. How John Denver fought his way into fame, the wild rise nobody saw coming. John Denver's story didn't glide into success. It clawed its way there, one small-town stage and one restless leap at a time. It all started when he was just 11, standing in front of a gift that would quietly reroute the rest of his life, an acoustic guitar from his grandmother. He took to it the way some kids take to breathing. Before long, the shy boy who never quite felt settled suddenly had something that made sense. And by the time he reached college, He was already brave enough to step into local clubs, guitar in hand, testing his voice in front of strangers who didn't know they were listening to a future icon. But there was a problem with his name, Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. It carried history, pride, and weight, but it wasn't built for marquees. Randy Sparks from the New Christie Minstrels pulled him aside one day and suggested that the name wouldn't fit on a sign. John knew he wasn't wrong, so he reached for something simpler, cleaner, and truer to the wide-open feeling he kept chasing. He chose Denver. He ended up at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, studying architecture while singing with a folk group called the Alpine Trio. He joined Delta Tau Delta, kept writing songs, kept dreaming bigger than his surroundings, and eventually realized the classroom wasn't where his future lived. In 1963, he finally acted on the pull he had felt for years. He dropped out, packed up, and moved to Los Angeles, ready to test himself in the crowded folk clubs where unknowns either bloomed or vanished. 2 years later, in 1965, he entered the big leagues when he joined the Chad Mitchell Trio, stepping directly into the founder's role. The group changed, morphed, and eventually became Denver, Boise, and Johnson. Through festivals and performances, like the Philadelphia Folk Festival in '68, John kept sharpening his voice and presence. And by 1969, he realized something important. He didn't want to hide inside a trio anymore. It was time to stand alone. That year, he released Rhymes and Reasons. The label didn't put muscle behind it, but John wasn't the type to sit and wait for a miracle. He drove through the Midwest like a one-man promotional machine. Small towns, school auditoriums, coffee houses, and American Legion halls. He walked in, offered himself up for free, hung posters on telephone poles, and marched into radio stations with his guitar, ready to perform on air if that's what it took. It worked. People connected with him, and those early fans stayed with him for life. 2 years before the album came out, John had made a small demo for friends and family. Buried on that tape was a gentle piece called Babe, I Hate to Go, which he later renamed Leaving on a Jet Plane. Milt Okun heard something special in it and passed it to Peter, Paul, and Mary. Their version soared straight to #1, while John's original climbed the charts in the UK and the US. Suddenly, doors that had been welded shut started to crack open. He recorded Take Me to Tomorrow and Whose Garden Was This in 1970, slowly inching upward. But 1971 brought the shift he had been waiting for. Poems, prayers, and promises landed in the world, and with it came a song that would follow him for the rest of his life, Take Me Home, Country Roads. The first pressings were distorted. Jerry Weintraub, his new manager, well-connected, relentless, and fiercely ambitious, refused to let the song fail. He pushed for a reissue, launched a radio campaign, and let it start in Denver, Colorado, the very city that shared John's chosen name. The gamble worked. The song swept the country and became a kind of musical passport for anyone longing for home. From there, things moved fast. In 1972, Rocky Mountain High hit the top 10. Then came the tidal wave. Between 1974 and 1975, John delivered 4 #1 hits and 3 #1 albums. His long blonde hair, wire rim glasses, and embroidered Western shirts became part of his signature. Designer Anna Zapp crafted the shirts, and suddenly, John Denver wasn't just a singer. He was a look, a sound, a force. Weintraub pushed him into television, even when John didn't feel confident about his reach overseas. He had once remarked that he'd had no success in Britain, but Weintraub didn't care. He believed people needed to see John's face, not just hear his voice. And he was right. Appearances snowballed into full specials, including his wildly successful Rocky Mountain Christmas, a holiday broadcast watched by more than 60 million people. He hosted his own BBC series, The John Denver Show, and his concert special, An Evening with John Denver, even scored an Emmy. But success didn't mean peace. When John ended his business relationship with Weintraub in 1982, the breakup exploded. Weintraub threw him out of his office and launched accusations designed to wound. John later revealed that he had often bent his principles to keep the partnership stable. He admitted that every time he backed down out of fear or exhaustion, it felt like handing over a piece of his soul. Yet he didn't stop creating. He made lifelong memories with the Muppets, built a close bond with Jim Henson, and stepped into acting roles on television, and in the 1977 hit film Oh God, opposite George Burns. He hosted the Grammys 5 times and filled in for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. He was everywhere. And for a long stretch in the 1970s, he was unstoppable. Not everyone appreciated him. When he won the Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year award in 1975, Charlie Rich burnt the announcement on stage. Some claimed it was protest. Others insisted it was intoxication. Either way, it became one of those moments people still gossip about. But many stood up for John. Country singer Kathy Mattea reminded the world that he wasn't lightweight. He simply brought optimism to the table when cynicism was easier. He didn't fit into one box. He crossed folk, pop, and country with a style that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Outside music, John poured his energy into causes that mattered to him. He co-founded the Hunger Project in 1977, worked on President Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger, and performed at the Music for UNICEF concert. He wrote, "I Want to Live" as a theme for the Commission's mission. And in the mid-1970s, something extraordinary happened. His father, the stern man he had spent his life trying to understand, taught him how to fly. The sky became their bridge. They reconciled, healed old wounds, and even co-hosted a special called The Higher We Fly, an award-winning look at aviation that honored both their passions. For once, the world around John wasn't pulling him apart. He was rising, literally, with the man he had been trying to reach since childhood. Through fame, conflict, miracles, and heartbreak, John Denver kept moving, kept dreaming, and kept singing like a man who understood the cost of wanting more from life than it was willing to give. Fame and success were only part of the story. Beneath the songs and the accolades, there was a heart still learning to navigate love, connection, and intimacy. And that heart would soon find its first true anchor. John Denver's wild love life, the real stories behind his 2 turbulent marriages. Long before the fame, long before his voice became part of America, John Denver was just an obscure folkie with the Chad Mitchell Trio, at least according to People. And in 1966, during a concert at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, Minnesota, his life quietly changed for good. It was at that event he first laid eyes on Annie Martell. Annie remembered wearing blue jeans, a lumberjack shirt, and penny loafers that day. Nothing dramatic, nothing planned. She later recalled that John claimed he fell for her on the spot. But it wasn't instantaneous for her, though. Their first date didn't happen until a year later. And when John proposed in 1967, she told him no. But love has a way of circling back. She eventually changed her mind, and her best friend stepped in and urged John to try again. He did, and they married that very same year. Once the 1970s hit, Annie was right there beside him as the world finally caught up to what John had always been carrying. Rocky Mountain High, Take Me Home, Country Roads. Songs that didn't just reach charts, they carved themselves into the culture. The couple adopted 2 children together, John and Anna Kate, then settled in Aspen, a place John held on to for the rest of his life. But even the best love stories get tested. Their marriage weathered its own storms, the kind that don't make headlines, but leave marks. During a temporary separation, John found himself skiing in Colorado, surrounded by mountains that looked both peaceful and unforgiving. Something inside him cracked open. While sitting on a ski lift, the scenery hit him so deeply that he started forming a melody right there in the cold air. That spark became Annie's song, a raw, aching love letter to the woman he was trying to win back. The song became a worldwide hit, one of the biggest of his career. But music can heal only so many wounds, and some wounds run deeper than poetry. Adam Reeder, in a 2024 episode of Professor of Rock, explained that the pressures of John's fame, mixed with cheating and endless time apart, slowly drained the marriage, and when things broke, they broke hard. Their split revealed a side of John that many fans never imagined. Reader described how John's temper sometimes surged violently, spilling into abusive behavior during the unraveling of their marriage. In one moment of rage, John nearly choked Annie while they were dividing their property. And in the incident people still whisper about, he took a chainsaw to the bed they once shared and sliced it straight down the middle. By 1982, the marriage was over. But John wasn't done trying to build a life with someone. Just a few years later, in 1985, while staying at the Siebel Townhouse in Sydney, he walked into a bar and spotted actress Cassandra Delaney. Just like with Annie, that spark hit him instantly. They married in 1988. And a year later, their daughter Jessie Bell arrived. For a moment, it looked like John had stepped into a calm new chapter. But the peace didn't last. By 1991, the relationship had collapsed, and separation turned into a finalized divorce in 1993, just 5 years after the wedding. In his memoir, Take Me Home, John didn't hold back. He wrote that before their short marriage finally ended, Cassandra managed to make him feel like a fool from one end of the valley to the other. It was one of those confessions that showed just how deeply that relationship cut him. Through both marriages, one long and winding, the other brief and bruising, John Denver kept searching for the kind of love he wrote about, the kind he believed in, the kind he never stopped chasing, even when his heart was already carrying more pain than he admitted. His music told the world who he wished he could be. His relationships revealed the man he was still struggling to understand. And that's where the real truth about John Denver begins to take shape. Because the heartbreak didn't stand alone. It was tied to something deeper, something heavier, something he spent years trying to outrun. The cracks in his personal life were only the surface. Behind the warm smile and the golden voice, there was a man locked in a quiet tug-of-war with the darker corners of his own mind. John Denver, the dark struggles behind the sunshine. John Denver looked like a man who had it all. The smile, the voice, and the songs that felt like a warm embrace. But behind the music and the sunny image, there were battles that few ever saw. Battles that lingered quietly beneath the surface of a life the world thought it understood. For every Take Me Home, Country Roads, or Rocky Mountain High, there was tension, insecurity, and pressure that threatened to pull him under. His performing career began with the Chad Mitchell Trio, a folk group known for their harmonies and pointed social commentary during the years leading up to America's involvement in Vietnam. He joined in 1965 as Chad Mitchell stepped away, and for 4 years, the trio performed across the nation, giving Denver a taste of both the thrill and the grind of the road. When the group disbanded in 1969, it left him standing at the edge of a solo career that would soon make him famous. But the climb was not easy. Rhymes and Reasons, released in October 1969, was his first solo effort. Success felt distant, but by April 1971, Poems, Prayers and Promises, and the single Take Me Home, Country Roads gave him a foothold with the public, the song rising to number 2 on Billboard's Hot 100. His producer, Milt Okun, who would guide him through nearly 20 albums, was praised as a genius marketer. Yet critics often mocked the lush strings and arrangements, dismissing Denver as a lightweight. He became known as Sunshine Boy, a label that ignored the depth of his songwriting and the intensity of his craft. Denver began to stretch into television, taking roles that blended drama and music. In 1973, he played a murder suspect on Owen Marshall, Counselor at Law. And in 1974, he guest-starred on McCloud, performing a song as part of the episode. His breakout came in 1977 with Oh God, where he played a supermarket assistant entangled in religious chaos. Working alongside George Burns, Denver proved he could act, but the public still clung to the cheerful image that often left him frustrated and misunderstood. Behind the scenes, the pressures of fame, touring, and expectation took their toll. Despite 33 gold and platinum records, Denver wrestled with depression and self-doubt. In the late 1970s, he enrolled in EST, a controversial training program meant to help people recognize what was holding them back. Even as audiences adored his music, he struggled privately to feel worthy of the acclaim. His humanitarian work and environmental activism offered purpose, but came with its own frustrations. He met with oceanographer Jacques Cousteau, photographed birds in Alaska, and herded wild cattle, all while trying to balance the chaos at home. His marriage to Annie Martel, inspiration for Annie's song, deteriorated under the strain of alcohol, touring, and unspoken resentments. The infamous axe and chainsaw incident, with Annie chopping a shrub oak and John retaliating on their kitchen table in bed, was proof of the tension boiling beneath the public veneer. Their marriage ended in 1982. Denver's personal struggles did not stop there. Emotional detachment from his father, a military pilot, left long-term scars, even after they reconciled through shared flying lessons and a televised tribute to aviation. His second marriage ended acrimoniously in 1993, and his attempts to maintain stability were constantly tested. Even as he battled his own demons, Denver continued to fight for causes he believed in. He founded the WinStar Foundation to promote sustainable living, testified before the Senate on music censorship alongside Dee Snider and Frank Zappa, and worked tirelessly to fight world hunger, traveling to Africa and meeting with leaders. Yet, when he expressed interest in joining the charity single We Are the World, he was turned away. Denver later wrote that it broke his heart not to be included, a reminder that recognition often eluded the man who gave so much. By the 1990s, Denver's life was marked by personal transitions, legal troubles, and the shadow of past mistakes. Flying became both a passion and a practical tool. He piloted himself to shows and experimented with low-emission aircraft. But previous DUI convictions complicated matters. On October 12, 1997, that fragile balance ended when a home-built aircraft he was piloting crashed into Monterey Bay, near Pacific Grove, California. He was 53. Even in his final months, Denver's mind was restless. He released All Aboard, a children's album themed around railroad songs, and began reimagining his greatest hits, determined to reclaim his art and his legacy. His life was a constant tension between brilliance and burden, hope and heartbreak. John Denver's music may have lifted millions, but his story reveals that even the brightest voices carry shadows. John Denver died painfully at 53. His final days were just heartbreaking. The final chapter of John Denver's life began on a cool October afternoon in 1997 at Monterey Peninsula Airport, a quiet regional strip tucked against the California coast. Denver slipped into the cockpit of his newly acquired experimental Long-EZ plane, eager for a short flight over the bay. He practiced 3 touch-and-go landings, the kind of routine drills pilots do when they are settling into a new aircraft. On the surface, nothing looked unusual, but behind that calm, something important was already out of place. Denver was not legally allowed to fly. His pilot's license had been suspended after past DUI issues, yet he still lifted off, trusting the sky the way he always had. The plane itself carried its own history. Around that time, this particular model had been involved in 61 accidents, 19 of them fatal. Denver had bought the single-seat Long-EZ from a man in Santa Maria and spent the afternoon getting comfortable with it. Less than 30 minutes into the flight, he radioed the tower, mentioning he was adjusting his transponder, the device that sends a signal so air traffic controllers can track a plane. Investigator George Pedersen later explained that Denver sent the transponder signal and asked if it was visible on the screen. The tower saw it, tried to respond, and then watched the signal vanish at exactly 5:28 p.m. There had not been any warning signs, no distress call, just silence. Witnesses later described seeing the small plane about 500 feet above the water before it suddenly dropped straight down, slamming into the ocean and breaking apart instantly. The wreckage scattered across the surface, drifting not far from Point Pinos. Pilots familiar with the Long-EZ suggested that if the front wing, called a canard, broke loose from its struts, the aircraft would lose all balance and fall out of the sky. Another longtime Long Easy pilot shared that Denver, who had been renting a home nearby, might have been so focused on adjusting his radar settings that he did not realize the plane was sinking toward the water. Before taking off, Denver told people at the airport that he had enough fuel for about an hour. He had even left his Porsche in the parking lot with the top down, expecting to return shortly. The plane he was flying was unusual. Long Easy aircraft are not sold pre-built. Owners buy blueprints and build them by hand with styrofoam, fiberglass, and metal. With a canard in front, a rear propeller, and speeds nearing 200 miles per hour, it was a striking machine, but one that demanded precision. Experts estimated Denver's plane to be about 10 years old. His death was instant, but the story did not end there. When investigators began piecing together what happened, they focused on a fuel selector valve tucked in a nearly unreachable spot behind the pilot. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that Denver likely diverted his attention while trying to switch fuel tanks mid-flight, a move he should not have needed at all if the main tank had been topped off. They believed he twisted in the seat to reach the valve, lost control, and unknowingly sent the plane into a nosedive. What made this even heavier was that Denver already knew the valve was a problem. The plane's designer had promised to fix the flaw before the end of Denver's next tour. Time ran out before anyone could make that change. Investigators also discovered that Denver had not refueled that day. He felt he did not need to, since he would be up only an hour. He had not filed a flight plan either. Still, some pilots were not convinced. George Rutan, whose brother designed the Long Easy, shared an unsettling thought. To push the nose down with that much force, someone would have to be deliberate. It left a dark cloud floating over the case. But those who truly knew Denver were firm that he would not have taken his own life. Recovery teams searched the cold water for hours. The crash had been so violent that they found his body in pieces spread across 25 feet of ocean, including his head. As investigators looked deeper, his past resurfaced. Denver had spoken openly in his autobiography about experimenting with marijuana, LSD, and cocaine. He had 2 DUI arrests. Even the FBI had noted drug use in old files connected to his anti-war activism. In his final years, some headlines focused more on his legal troubles than his humanitarian work, but his toxicology report told a different story. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing in his system contributed to the crash. His past was not the cause. What did matter was the earlier decision by the National Transportation Safety Board to deny him a medical certificate, making it illegal for him to fly that day. Even with all the heartbreak, Denver's legacy did not fade. Today, a towering bronze statue stands at Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado, its 15-foot form capturing him with a guitar on his back and a massive eagle landing on his arm. It feels like a frozen moment of everything he loved: nature, freedom, and music. His tragedy now sits alongside others lost to aviation disasters: Lynyrd Skynyrd, Patsy Cline, Otis Redding, Aaliyah, and artists whose lights vanished mid-air. In 2014, Denver was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. 2 of his children, Jesse Bell and Zachary, were there to see the unveiling. The tribute coincided with a photography exhibition called Sweet, Sweet Life, showcasing rare images of him. A memorial plaque rests near the crash site in Pacific Grove, where fans still stop, listen to the ocean, and think of him. Every October, Aspen, his longtime home, holds a week-long celebration in his name. Tribute bands fill the streets with the songs people grew up with. Local radio stations play his music for days. Fans walk the trails he once walked, letting his voice drift back into the open air. John Denver's final days were lonely and heavy, wrapped in missteps, bad luck, mechanical flaws, and unanswered questions. But the man himself, the warmth in his voice, the love he carried for the world, and the songs that felt like sunlight never disappeared. His life ended painfully at 53, but the music he left behind keeps rising, the way his voice always did, steady and full of hope. even when his own skies were growing dark. Were you a fan of John Denver? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video on your screen. You'll enjoy it.